How's it going, YouTube? Come on in today with another video, and today, guys, the video is going to be the Where to Handtrap series. As far as the why goes, I feel like I haven't really went too in depth as to the point as where I really want to be at with you as far as post Suda goes and on our way to Suda and things that you can do to really counter where we're at right now. I left Malice out of this, and if you want to see a Malice video by itself, let me know. I really do want to do a huge breakdown on that deck. I'm also working on Crystron right now. I think the deck's really cool. Do I think that it's going to be really meta impactful? Not really, but I really do like water cards, and I think the deck's going to be really neat, so I'm going to try it out and do my best with it. But at the end of the day, I do want to make sure that you have as much information as possible, and I'm going to be breaking down the different decks and cores and engines by themselves versus together today to really hone in on some really key facts and talk about some things that are really important. And maybe there's some things that you might find important in the game that maybe you don't have to find as important. And I hope that that really does kind of flip a switch for you and really helps you out in your gameplay moving forward. If you haven't already checked out my sponsors over Imperium Duels, Dragonshield, Gem, Cloud, RW, and Grimoire, definitely go ahead and check them all out down below in the description. Also, my TCGPlayer Link costs nothing to you to use, and it really just directly supports the channel. I really do appreciate it, and that's going to help me just buy more cards for things like the card drives and really be able to keep giving back to the community. So thank you all so much for your support. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're on our way to 30,000. We're just cruising our way there, and I appreciate you all so very much. And without further ado, let's hop right on into our first slide. So today we're going to be talking about Fiendsmith. We're going to be talking about Fiendsmith by itself as an engine, and then we'll be talking about the inclusivities of things like Ryzeal, because we already know that's where this really does belong, this format. But there's a few other things that I really want to point out, and one of the things that I want to bring up is you probably noticed that there's a card missing on the screen. Take 2 seconds and see if you can find it. If you haven't already guessed, though, it is Sequence. And this is a huge thing that I want to bring up because I feel like people are just putting too much emphasis on just negating the sequence. I don't feel like it's that important, and I want to show you why you might just not really have to care about a sequence resolving. There's so many other cards right now that you can be playing, and I feel like it can make your playlines a lot better and also help you not play into things like talent as much. Now, there is a new Fiendsmith line that is happening where if you have a way to Fiendsmith and you open Engraver, you can go Necroquip and Engraver, activate Track, get Lurie, use Necroquip and Lurie to go into your sequence, summon Desiree, make Agnum Day, and then Agnum Day back your Engraver, overlay for a Caesar. And then on your opponent's turn, you can go Lacrima, target the Agnum Day, bring back the Desiree. And so now on turn 1, you're getting your setup for Caesar and Desiree, which is really cool. It's a really neat line. But game 1, I know I get this question quite often. A lot of people were like, well, why do you set up High Wave instead of just going for like your Desiree line? And why would people do that? Well, a lot of times you do delete the amount of follow-ups that you'll have, and you get rid of a lot of your names to make the Desiree. So if you make the Wave King, it's really nice because you leave the Lacrima and the Requiem in the graveyard, so you have access to the trap card. And that's one thing where game 1, when you don't know what you're playing against, especially if you're not worried about like post-sided blowout cards, I'm just making a Wave King because Wave King's broken. And that's one thing where your opponent still has to deal with it. A lot of times it's pretty easy to deal with, but I'm going to force them to deal with it, right? And then if they want to deal with it, I'm using Paradise. And the other thing too is some people want to run like 2 Desiree so they can make one and then use the other one for Paradise. But like the extra deck is so tight. Like there's literally no room for anything in that deck. So right now that's what I'm dealing with, right? Like, what do I cut? And it's really hard to answer that question, especially when we got Eclipse and I'm like, all right, how do I fit this card in my extra deck? And now I have to figure out what else I want to cut. Let's talk about a few ways that you can really interact with the Fiendsmith engine to make things a lot better on yourself. One is Droll. Your opponent's going to be using Cross to draw. They're going to be using Necroquip to draw. They're going to be using Ryzeal cards to draw. They're going to be using Engraver to search, Attract to search, right? So you really want to make sure that you have Droll because it's going to shut down 90% of what this deck's trying to do. It's really strong and Droll is very good. It's very bad into Malice, so side it because if you play against Malice and you have Droll, you're going to feel bad. But at the end of the day, Droll is still very strong. you do want to go ahead and Bishul away the Requiem. It's their way to turn any engine into engine. It's their way to extend back into the game. It's their way to make a Necro Quip. This is a card that you definitely want to get rid of as soon as possible. Can you get rid of other things? You definitely can. When they go for the Caesar and Desiree line, when they go to bring back the Engraver off the Agnum Day, you can just go ahead and get rid of the Engraver, right? Which is really strong, especially if you have like a Magnamut, because at that point you can just get rid of the other Engraver so they don't get the Caesar, and it's even better because at that point you have the other Bishul coming up. So in the end phase, you can either get rid of the Lacrima so that your opponent doesn't have to get to the trap card, or you can just go ahead and get rid of the Desiree so that the Agnum Day can't really do much. Another thing too is you don't really have to worry about stopping a sequence, which I think is really important to note, because you can always just Nibiru your opponent once a Desiree is on the board. But you want to make sure you do it before they summon Agnum Day, because if your opponent has Lacrima, they're just going to be able to bring back Desiree anyway next turn. So if you have Rock, drop it when there's a Desiree on board with a sequence. A lot of people did cut Agnum Day, but it's still around. The other time that you want to drop Rock is going to be when your opponent has Engraver and Necroquip up, because if you cannot deal with the Caesar, there's a good opportunity that the Caesar is going to be there. But the other thing too is that you can metagame your opponent, and you can say, that's fine when they have the two bodies up, and a lot of times they'll just be like, all right, cool, and summon a Caesar. But the other half of the time, they're just going to go for a Desiree because they're like, oh, my opponent doesn't have Rock, crazy. So they're going to combo. So it's definitely a mind game as far as what they're going to go for. But it's still really nice, though, because if you have like an Ogre, right, it's really awkward because they're going to make that Caesar. And you're like, yeah, that's fine. Like, that's not really that big of a deal. Or you can wait for them to like go ahead and make this big board with like the Caesar and the Desiree to come back. You have Ogre to answer the Desiree. If you can get them to use that Desiree and then you stop it with the Ogre, then you could potentially have like a Thrust or a Talent live. Now you can deal with the Caesar, and even better, you could attempt to go ahead and just steal the Caesar, and now you have protection from things like Nibiru. You have the Lacrima that's forced out to summon out the Requiem. But even at that point, the take has already happened, right? So you're going to be able to stop the Requiem from trying to summon back out the Lacrima. So a lot of very good interaction that can happen there. And that's why Talent's a 3 of in the main deck right now. That card's absolutely absurd. And you should always be siding 3 Thrust right now. That card's also very strong. I also really like saving Bell and Ash for my turn so you don't play into Talent or Thrust, because you can Bell the effective Lacrima to bring the Requiem back or the Agnum Day. You also can just Ash Blossom the Paradise, so it makes Ash a crazy 6 draw, because at that point you're like, cool, I don't lose to the trap. Then you can always hold Imperm for the Caesar, which is really strong, because again, if you don't want to deal with it, you don't have to at that point. Now, of course, when we see the Ryzeal engine with the Fiendsmith engine, you can see how many times over you can go ahead and just stop the duo drive. You can nib on the effect to add with the duo drive, you can Ash the duo drive, you can Ghost Ogre it, you can hit it with Mourner, Veiler, or Imperm. You want to stop duo. The Fiendsmith engine is very good in its crazy follow-up, but the biggest problem in the deck is duo resolving. So make sure that you are going after duo, because the card's very, very strong. Now, you do want to make sure that if your opponent's using Twins of the Eclipse and you know it's about to go into grave, like let's say they're about to go like Detonator Pop itself, you can go ahead and Bishul away another Exceed in their graveyard if you have the opportunity. Obviously not like a duo drive because of the fire, but if one of the two of the rank 4s in their grave are going to be a light or a dark, you can go ahead and try to get rid of it. Same thing with DD Crow. If it's a duo drive in grave and you know the Twin's about to go to grave, you can go ahead and preemptively DD Crow the duo drive, so when the Twin goes to grave, they can't use Twin effect. The other thing too is you can just Bell Twin. Twin is very good, and it's literally just plug-in from the extra deck. So you can, like, late game, use X to use Twin, or you can just equip it underneath your Detonator, which is crazy, because if you summon, like, a Baguska, you can get a Baguska out of nowhere later on, which is even better. So it makes Baguska pretty crazy. Now, as for Mitsurugi, this one's pretty awkward because it's not a great deck to Handtrap. It really isn't. There's only one spot that's, like, real crazy, and that's on Prayers, which is a quick play, because it attempts to summon back from grave or from hand. So you can bell that effect, which is really strong because you shut down both because they happen in sequence and it's all one effect. That's why you can Dominus Impulse a Sengun Kaiman, which is really crazy, and a lot of people don't know that, but it's the same thing here where you can just go ahead and bell Prayer because they happen in sequence, so it's all one effect. And you can also Ash Prayer, and this is by and large the #1 interaction spot. You can go ahead and Bell or Ash the Amino, which is fine, but you want to hit Prayer 100% of the time. You can also Bishul or DD Crow the Amino, and if that's your option, you take it. It's very strong, and you need to do that, because Amino is really annoying to deal with. Not only is it a board wipe, but it also forces you to discard a card if you want your first activation to go through that they choose, right? So if you activate, like, Desires, they're like, either you discard a card or that card's not going through, and that's really obnoxious. So Amino, very annoying card, but Prayer, very crazy card. And what's even better is that Ritual spell in this deck is just kind of insane. It's really, really good, but you really don't have to worry about any of that as long as you stop the Prayer. A lot of times what you'll see is your opponent's going to summon King of the Feral Imp. You want to hit that card on summon. 100%. You want to Mourner it, Veiler it, or Imperm before they detach. Because if you let them detach, a lot of times you want to tribute your king anyway. So you'll go like king effect, detach, search. Is that okay? Your opponent goes Veiler, and you go, dope, activate Prayer. Like, you were going to tribute it anyway, so if your opponent wastes a hand trap on that, even better. Because at that point, not only are you tributing away your Feral Imp to be able to search, as well as your Prayers are searching, but now you get to go ahead and summon the card that you searched, right? So you're going to search the Saji, which is the card above the king over here, and the Saji is really cool. The card itself allows you to go ahead and add a spell or trap, so it just gets you to the Ritual spell, and it starts a lot of your combos. The Saji and the other level 4 are both very cool cards, but they don't really start anything unless you're playing like Ogdo Attic with it, because you need other reptiles. A lot of times your combo is going to start from opening Prayer and then having access to King, because if you can go King Detach and then Prayer effect, you're in for a very good turn. You're able to do a lot. And if you haven't already seen the combo of my last video, you end on like 10-11 interruptions. That's kind of wild. So definitely make sure that you are aware of what this deck does. Just know that board breakers are usually a lot better, or Bishuls or Bell are going to be your best friends in this matchup. Now for Crystron. I read these cards so you don't have to. So these cards are definitely very interesting, and there's a lot going on. Now Droll and Lancia especially, are both very strong, and you're already playing Lancia for Malice, so you're already having a really good card in your sideboard for this matchup. I also am siding Droll right now. I think that card is a mandatory 3-of in the sideboard as well. I think my side is just so perfect right now. There's just nothing that I want to change about it. So I'm very excited going to Rosemont this weekend. So if you're going to be in Rosemont, let me know. That's going to be a lot of fun to go ahead and meet everyone. But definitely excited to go ahead and play Ryzeal Fiendsmith. The deck is absolutely absurd, and I can't wait to get first place for y'all. But so the next thing here is going to be Nibiru. So there's going to be a point in the combo when they put 2 5s on the board, and that's going to be after they go through things like Cherubini and what have you. You want to go ahead and just drop rock there, because your opponent's going to make Nova into Infinity. And if you try to rock on Nova, it's going to be a really bad time when your opponent summons Makaba. And they are playing Makaba. If you are not familiar with the Christmas package, I used to play it a long time ago, against the Invoke deck, and your opponent would have Makaba, Nova, Intis in their extra deck. So when you activate Maximus, they go dump Nova, dump Intis, and then they go pop your card. The Nova will now summon the Makaba, and I have an interruption. So it's pretty crazy, but you want to drop rock before the Nova. Really important. Cluster's really good. It's just another spot removal. You can either bell on the activation of Cluster, or even if they already have it active and then they go to use the card, you can also just go ahead and bell, which is really strong. But you want to make sure that you have either Bell or Ogre for this, and it's going to depend on how they play it. If they activate Cluster and use the effect on activation, you can bell and it will remove Cluster from the board. If your opponent activates the card and then they go Cluster effect after it was activated, now you can Ogre it, right? So it depends on how they're playing, but you can use one or the other. The standard playline off of Terror Top is going to be Terror Top, Takum Tomborg into Cherubini. Cherubini dumps Smyger. Smyger is going to banish itself to go ahead and add the Inclusion. Inclusion is going to activate to add the hole on the right here, and then the hole is going to pop Inclusion, which is a continuous spell. Then on Summon of Whole, you can dump 2 Crystron monsters from your deck, which is crazy. They have to have different names. Then you get to your rank 5 play. So that's one thing where you want to make sure you shut that down as soon as possible, because you also get rid of the Link 2 on board and both monsters. So it's going to put you in a very commanding position. The other card that's underneath Smyger is the Tristalos. Card's really good. You can ash the effect in the graveyard, so they can't just summon 2 Crystrons from deck for free by destroying a Synchro monster that they control. So keep that in mind as well. But I do think that your route of winning this game against Crystron is going to be either ashing Smyger, or if they open Inclusion, then you just go ahead and ash Inclusion, because you don't want them to get to the whole card, because that card's going to be able to dump 2 and get them to even more extenders that they just don't need access to. Now the last thing here is going to be Memento. This is something that I really wanted to put together again, just because I want to touch over this one more time, just to make sure that everyone's really aware of how to play against this deck. Now, you do want a Bishul or DD Crow or a Bell Gaddock. This is the card that you really don't want coming back to the board. Being able to recur different cards like the Fusion spell is something that you just want left in the graveyard. Now, you do want to wait with Rock till end of main. You don't really have to care too much. There's not going to be a point in time where I'm like, well, maybe you should hit here. Usually it's like end of main, you're fine just dropping Rock. If you drop Lancey against his deck, they'll usually end with like Mason Hand, and they'll have like a couple pops on your turn, which isn't the end of the world. It just makes the board not as crazy. They can't banish the Fusion, and they can't banish the Fusion spell from grave to go ahead and get more pluses. So that's another thing where dropping Rock and even dropping Lancey early on is really strong. Ashing Bone Party, of course, being able to stop that, which is a really annoying card. Ogre onto the field spell, and then any kind of negation that you have onto the horse, because that card is going to be able to just dump way too many cards for way too much free value. I hope that you found this video informative and really helpful moving forward into the format and as more testing goes on. I have a lot of different videos I want to make going forward, and I'm so excited to just bring in the new year and just keep on posting content. So subscribe to the channel for more content, join my Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and join my Discord if you haven't already. Catch you all in the next video. Thanks.